Welcome to the maiden voyage of the Runs Club podcast. This space will be all running, fitness, and rebuilding strength both mentally and physically while dealing with the pitfalls of chronic illness. Today, I'm joined by Oisin, the founder of EMP, Enhanced Nutrition and Performance. Oisin has a master's in sports and exercise nutrition and is a member of the British Dietetics Association. Very fancy. I think it's fair to say he knows his stuff. So let's hear from the man himself. Oisin, welcome to the Runs Club podcast. Good to have you here, my brother.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Could you tell us who is EMP?
So the company is Enhanced Nutrition and Performance. I started it just after COVID, like 4 years ago. I was in college in the University of Limerick when I was younger. 2016, 2017, I spotted this guy in the UK doing VO2 max testing and metabolic testing on F1 drivers and Premier League footballers and stuff. And not many people would have known about it at this stage. And I spotted it and I was like, that's really cool. I want to be the first person to bring that to the west of Ireland. And I just got obsessed with it. I used to have it as the screensaver on my laptop in college, people doing metabolic testing and VO2 max testing. And I was thinking, okay, this is pretty niche. It's quite scientific. You got to have a few letters beside your name, right? So nutrition was always something that I was super passionate about. It was always something that I knew I wanted to work in that field. I just didn't know whether it was going to be working in sports performance, working in dietetics. I was personal training at the time. Was I going to try and link that with the nutrition side of things as well? I didn't really know, but I knew that nutrition was going to be my job. So I was like, okay, I got to go get some letters, right? So finish my degree. Then I think COVID, I finished my master's then in sports nutrition from Ulster University. And I finished that during COVID or just before COVID. And then once COVID happened, I thought, right, this is the perfect opportunity for me to launch the business. I had already been coaching for 12 years at that stage. So I had a lot of skin in the game and I kind of was ready to take the next step and start my business. And I thought that metabolic testing and VO2 max testing was something that was so niche. And I thought, do you know what? Let's run with it. Let's start it. And that was 4.5 years ago now. And we've been going from strength to strength since.
Absolutely. A long way to continue. The rocket ship keeps sailing. Let's go.
Absolutely.
So just with the Runs Club that we've started at the minute, you're the best man to give advice here. We have just kicked off 2 challenges. One is going to be the fastest 5K time and the other one is going to be the most improved 5K time. So we have a nice balance of people who are already running and people who are just kicking things off. For someone who's just, I suppose, starting their couch to 5K journey, what are the first steps they should take?
I think one of the biggest things and the most important thing first and foremost is to have a plan. I always find with people, and this is in my experience, when they start running, they feel like, okay, I'm going to start running. What's the first thing they'll do? They'll put on their shoes and be like, I'm going to run a 5K. It's like, well, no, you're not. Like, that's just silly. So I think one of the biggest things is start slower than you think you need to. That's probably the biggest tip and I speak from experience personally with this as well. I've always been under the impression that if I want to get back into my running phase, that I need to just jump straight back in head first, which is probably the worst approach to take, really, because if you're running is hard, like running is really hard. So I think to build up that element of confidence and to build up the consistency, you know yourself how fast you can actually see the changes from a fitness perspective when you are that little bit consistent. So I think starting slower than you feel like you need to and building things up on a week-to-week basis while being as consistent as you can is probably the biggest tip I would give people on that, for sure.
Absolutely, because I know when I started off my own running journey, I just went hell for leather straight out the door and I was like, why, this is terrible. Why would anyone do this? But when you start slowly and you build it up, you really see the progression because it eases you into it and you can build up that consistency. When you see people who are returning to fitness after maybe a stint out, what are the biggest mistakes they make kicking things back?
It's just coming out of the blocks too fast. I mean, they'll feel like this, applies to the gym, but also running as well. They'll feel, okay, I'm going to get back into the swing of things now. I'm going to run 5 days this week. They'll go out, they'll do a 5K for the first day. They'll get halfway through it and they'll be like, this is shit. Get me back out of this. I'm done. And then they'll go home, they'll have failed, and then they'll be crippled for like 3 or 4 days afterwards because their body just isn't used to running. So definitely coming out of the blocks too fast and not respecting the difficulty and the demand that running actually has on your body. It's tough and it's sore. But if you're consistent in building it up week to week, that's where you start to really, number one, enjoy it a lot more, because fun is obviously the most important thing, isn't it? And then you start to just see that progression. Definitely coming out of the blocks too fast and feeling like you're a hero straight off the bat is the biggest mistake, I feel, because people think I've been there before, so surely I can just go out and just do it again. It's like, no, you can't. You got to respect it. It's going to humble you quite quickly if you don't.
Yeah, completely. And you have to respect your body too, because, there's nothing worse than going out hell for leather and then getting injured and setting yourself back further. That's just detrimental to your goals. When you're talking to a beginner who's kind of kicking things off, how many sessions would you recommend they start off with, maybe in a week?
I guess that depends on their availability and like their life and what else they have going on in their life, and are they incorporating any strength training, or are they doing anything else on top of that. But I would always be trying to encourage 2 to 3 sessions. I think would probably be the sweet spot. If I have somebody coming into me into the coaching business and they're looking at trying to lose body fat or whatever, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to maybe start trying to run now. I'm like, okay, great. Let's start to implement some running sessions into your week. They will already be doing some form of strength training or yoga, Pilates, whatever that might be. So I'll probably start off with 2 runs a week, and we'll keep them. I mean, Johnny, I'm talking like, 10, 15 minutes twice a week, and then building things up. We're not in any rush to do anything. People feel like they need to just get really fit really fast and try and get it done in 6 or 8 weeks. It's very difficult to do that. You're not leaving much room for error or flexibility with your training. So I would say twice. In an ideal world, it would be fantastic to get 3 sessions done a week. If I was to say no strength training, 3 sessions a week, 3 runs. If you were doing strength training, probably 2.
Yeah, a little bit of less is more to kind of to kick things back into action and get the body in the position it needs to be in. I know when you start back running, it can obviously be quite a load on the body and the pounding on the pavement and different things like that. What would be your main tips for people who are avoiding injury?
I would say I'm always going to be biased towards nutrition, but sleep, rest, and recovery is obviously number one. Having the right footwear is huge as well, especially when you're starting a running journey. It's as you said, like for people that haven't done it before, it's demanding. So you can shoot yourself in the foot by wearing shoes that aren't suitable for number one you, but also for running as well. So that'd kind of be one of the biggest things. And strength training plays a massive role in everything as well. And more so from an injury prevention perspective, I know there's a lot of runners that just run and that's all they do. They might run 4, 5, 6 times a week. That's all well and fine, but that will catch up with you if you're not doing strength training. And people will think strength training, oh, I don't want to get bulky, I don't want to gain weight, I don't want to do any of this stuff. No, you're not doing that as a runner. You're strength training to support your running and even making you a better, more efficient runner as well. So strength training, getting that lower back strong, your glutes, your hamstrings, your calves, all up along your posterior chain, where people tend to find the biggest issues with their running from an injury perspective. You're going to the gym to support your running and to prevent injuries. So definitely strength training is probably going to be the biggest one. I find that running mechanics, again, like, could be something that we could go into for a long time, but running mechanics is obviously something that's quite important too. And the last one would probably be like hydration as well. People that go out running that would be dehydrated, you're massively increasing your risk of injury, because when your muscle is dehydrated, you have more of a chance of it, having an injury or getting a cramp or whatever it might be. So there's a lot there, and it's kind of like, okay, you've kind of spoken about everything there, Oisin, but those are the kind of things that you really need to pay attention to: sleep, nutrition, hydration, and strength training. But also, you're a big man for the yoga, Pilates, and the mobility work, something that I probably neglect myself, but that would also play a massive part in it all too.
Yeah, I suppose it's just doing as much as you can to fit into your schedule and ensure that you're in the best nick possible for everything you want to achieve. When people are a few weeks into their journey, they're probably thinking like, ooh, I really want to step things up a gear. What's the kind of good signs to know that you're ready to kind of take your training up a notch?
I think when you're finishing all your runs thinking, I could have done a little bit more there, that would probably be the first sign. When the program is becoming like really enjoyable and you're finishing each of your runs thinking, yeah, that was brilliant. Like I kind of feel like I could have gone a little bit longer there, because it's important to have your easy runs, but it's also important to have your harder runs too. So when your harder runs in your program are starting to feel that little bit easier and you're kind of looking for an extra set, or you're looking to be challenged that little bit more, you're feeling fitter, I think that's a really good sign to kind of push things on a little bit. But if you're following a structured program, I would always say just stick to the program, because that's a problem that a lot of people will have as well. As when you start to feel really good, you'll say, okay, I'm going to lean into this a little bit more. I'm going to push a little bit harder. And again, that's where the injuries might come. That's where you might have bit off more than you could chew. And you're like, damn it, I should have just stuck to the program. You know what I mean? Like that's literally what they're built for. But when you're finishing your runs thinking, yeah, I had a lot more in the tank there, that's probably a good indication that you should ramp it up a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. And patience is key, because I know sometimes you can go out one week and be like, oh my God, I could have run so much further, so much faster. And the next week you go to do it, and you're like, what the fuck was I thinking?
Literally, because this is the thing. Like, I mean, this some days you just feel unbelievable and you feel unstoppable, and then there's other days you just feel like shit. Doesn't matter what you do, you're going to go out there and you're just ticking a box. And you're like, am I actually getting unfitter? Am I actually getting worse? Like, what the fuck? But it's not the case. It's like, your next session's going to be a little bit better than, I think they say, every 1 in 3 sessions will be shit. It's just the reality. That's the statistic. You're going to really, really look forward to one session and you're going to smash it. There'll be one session that'll be a little bit meh, and then there'll be one session that's shit. And that's the rotation. So think about that. How many sessions across the year there are you going to finish feeling shit? A lot. So you need to get used to that. And it doesn't mean that you're failing. It doesn't mean that, you're going backwards. They're the sessions that count. I don't mean to sound like David Goggins here, but like it's the sessions that you don't want to do that mean the most. But it actually is very true.
Completely. And hearing that to kind of reiterate in people's minds is that, not every day is going to be the perfect day. And to have enough acceptance to say, oh, today wasn't great, but you know what? There's another session coming in another few days. We'll tackle it again. And just to have that patience with yourself. But no, that's fantastic advice. When we are moving through our challenge, we obviously want to get faster, and speed is definitely the goal. But what are the real steps to getting faster?
Consistency is probably the first and foremost most important thing. Consistency and patience. Getting fast, it's quite relative. How fast does an individual want to get? What's your starting point? If you're coming from a very low base, then your ability to get faster is going to be much quicker. If you're already very fit and you're looking to just get that extra 1-2%, it takes a lot longer. So again, it's relative to where you currently are in your running journey. But I would say having structure around the type of sessions that you're doing and paying a lot of attention to, number one, your fueling, but also number two, your heart rate zones, is absolutely crucial when you get to the stage where you're right. I'm quite fit now. Like I'm actually in a really good place. How do I take things to the next level? That's where you really need to start looking at the fueling for performance and fueling for the work required, but also paying attention to the type of sessions that you're doing, being smarter as opposed to just hammering yourself in the sessions, because you will be able to get a really good result by just going out and hammering yourself all the time. But that will come back to haunt you and you'll plateau very quickly. And that's when you need to have a little bit of, I suppose, variety in terms of the types of sessions that you're doing, and each session having a certain purpose around building your base or thresholds or whatever that might be. So that's probably answering your question in a bit of a roundabout way, but that would be kind of be the biggest thing to getting faster, is just making sure that the structure is there, setting clear goals, making sure you're meeting your requirements in terms of heart rate, but also like the fueling has to be top of mind 100%.
I know for myself in my own journey, I was always under fueling until I got your guidance. I was thinking, oh, I'm having enough calories. And then when you actually start using the apps and tracking everything, like, oh, wow, I'm not fueling right at all. But I just want to circle back just to two things you mentioned there. First of all, I just want to dive into fueling for a second. What would you recommend as a kind of good fuel, maybe an hour or two before someone was to go for a run?
So again, it's all like it's relative to like what sits well with you. And this is something that's really important, especially with running, because we all know, we've all been there, that when you go out for a run and you've eaten something that doesn't necessarily sit well with you, that, there's big problems that happen. There's big problems that happen. So I will always get my athletes and people that I'm coaching to test a certain fueling strategy or test certain foods within training first to see, right, let's consume this carbohydrate, be that pasta or rice or bagels or crumpets or whatever that might be. Let's test that, 1 to 2 hours before your run, see how you get on, finish your run, and give me some feedback. Were you bloated? Did you feel heavy? Did you feel light on your feet? Did you feel energetic? Was it sitting in your stomach? Did it digest well? There's so much to it. And to say that there's one type of fuel that's better than another is probably not the right thing to say. But obviously, carbohydrates are first and foremost the most important thing. And I know even with yourself, when we were looking at your running performance, your calories were thereabouts, but you were getting feck all carbs. You were so low on your carbohydrates, and that was limiting your performance. The minute we started to pay attention to that and started tracking your food, you started to consume more carbs, and then you started to perform better, you know? Isn't that right?
Wow, shock.
Yeah.
No, definitely. That was an absolute eye opener for me because I was eventually eating enough food, and then when you're actually tracking it properly, you're being like, "Oh my god, I was having way too much fat, and I was having very little carbs," and I was like, "Okay, time to switch that narrative around a little bit." Especially with when it comes to fueling and food, like everyone that would be listening to this podcast will have a form of a digestive issue, possibly. So
Mhm.
figuring out what is good for them, what's relative to what they're going to be able to digest and help that experience is great advice. You also touched on threshold work there. That's something everyone's seen an awful lot online is working threshold work. Could you dive into that a little bit for us and what exactly it is?
Yeah. So again, threshold sessions, any sessions that you're doing, I'm going to always repeat and like drill this into anybody that's listening. If you don't have your fueling right, there is no point in doing any of these runs. There really isn't. And a threshold run is essentially a run that you do to help manage your body's production of lactate, essentially. Okay, so a traditional threshold session would be, spending a little bit of time at your anaerobic threshold. Like, so your anaerobic threshold is the point in exercise where your body will transition from using fat and some carbohydrates to primarily 100% carbohydrates. And it's a point in exercise where you cannot stay for that long. Your body's starting to produce lactate. Lactate isn't necessarily a bad thing, but at your anaerobic threshold, your body is producing so much lactate that you're not able to clear it. You're not taking in enough oxygen to be able to clear that lactate. So you can only stay there for about 60 minutes or less, right? Before your body starts to be producing so much lactate that starts to spill out into your bloodstream. And that's when you will hit the wall. And I think we've all been there where we've hit the wall. And once you're there ain't no coming back from it. So, yeah, literally. So your threshold would be about typically 85 to 90% of your maximum heart rate. But when we get people into the lab to test their VO2 max, we can determine at what point exactly is their anaerobic threshold. So there's you often see people doing lactate testing where you'll see them, pricking somebody's ear or like their finger or something when they're exercising and taking like a sample of blood. That's basically assessing how much lactate is in their blood. With the test that we do, we can assess that without pricking the blood. So around, for anybody listening that doesn't have the ability to do a VO2 max test, around 85 to 90% of your maximum heart rate would be roughly your threshold. And the idea is we want to spend time at our threshold for our threshold runs. So we might do 15 minutes at threshold intensity. So 85 to 90% for 15 minutes. It's like not killing yourself, but it's comfortably hard. You're like, this is like hard, really hard, but I can manage it pretty okay. And you'll spend 15 minutes there, and then you'll take a 5-minute rest where your heart rate will come right back down again. And then you go back up for 15 minutes and then back down again for 5 and then back up for 15, or you could do 10 or you could do 8 or 6. And basically what you're doing is you're tethering, you're like edging there on your threshold. So you're spending time there, right? You're managing that production of lactate, you're building up lactate, right? And then you're going back down. And then you're back up and you're back down. So you're accumulating lactate, and your body's clearing it, and you're continuously trying to do that. And if you are doing that in the right way, you will be basically able to manage a very high intensity or run for a fast amount of time and maintain that for much longer because your body is able to manage. You're not getting stressed. Your body's able to manage that production of lactate that little bit better when you're spending time there in your training. It's probably one of the most misunderstood types of sessions that people do because people will assume, okay, threshold run, let's just hammer ourselves. But if you go too hard on your threshold, you're defeating the purpose of your threshold and you're moving up into VO2 max training then, which is a completely different type of training. So you got to be quite careful with your threshold runs. But I would definitely say start off slow with them as well. Maybe do sets of 6 minutes or 8 minutes, where you might do 3 by 6 or 3 by 8 or something like that. Generally speaking, there's like a 3 to 1 work to rest ratio. So if you're running for 15 minutes, you're resting for 5. Apply that same principle across the board to whatever time you do. So yeah, that's threshold. It's a bit of a confusing one, but definitely if you're doing them right, it can massively improve your running performance.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's great to get good insight into it because, you know, you just hear these buzzwords a lot and you're kind of thinking, what the hell is that? But to hear someone actually explain it is great. I know we've touched on the VO2 max quite a few times. Could you dive into what exactly is VO2 max?
So your VO2 max is essentially your engine capacity. So it's the maximum amount of oxygen that somebody can consume at any given time. So the higher the number, the more oxygen, the bigger your engine capacity, essentially. And basically, with the VO2 max, people will think the higher your VO2 max, the better your performance. It's like gets to a point where there's like not I wouldn't say like a diminishing return, but it gets to a point where if you continue to increase your VO2 max, that doesn't necessarily equate to faster running times. So let's just take a male, for example, myself and yourself. Like your VO2 max could be 60, my VO2 max could be 52, and I could run a faster 5K than you. So you got to be quite careful with VO2 max and how you approach it, as people will use it nearly from an ego perspective, and they use that as the only metric that they will track. But there's a lot more important things that you will track within your running performance to make you a better runner. You get to a point where your VO2 max is in a really good spot. Then you got to look at the other more important things, like building your aerobic base, working on your thresholds, and from a 5K perspective and what you're talking about, to you, that's a lot more important right now than I need to build my VO2 max. Your engine size, the bigger the engine, the more efficient, the more oxygen you can take in. It's always going to lead to being better, but there does come a point where you need to start to influence and work on other things like aerobic base and threshold, like your running economy and stuff like that. So yeah, that's essentially your VO2 max.
I know myself, when we tracked my wearable versus me doing the VO2 max, and there was a big difference in it. And sometimes we can get obsessed with these metrics. Like I hate looking at my Garmin when my VO2 max drops down. I'm like, oh, come on, what's going on here? But I know myself, I get obsessed with the metrics. When it comes to kind of peeling things back, what are the actual metrics people should be looking at that's the most important?
Are we speaking specifically about running or just in general?
I suppose in general and running, whichever one you fancy hitting on there, go for it.
I guess it depends on like what your goal is to track. I mean, are you using like an Apple Watch, a wearable? Are you just looking to track like observational stuff day to day? I would probably say this is a very broad question, right? So I'm going to try and answer this in the best way I can.
I'm not helping you here.
We'll speak about performance in particular performance, right? So when I look at performance, obviously body composition is probably one of the biggest things, because that will influence your performance massively. So if you have the chance to be able to track body fat percentage or even scale weight and photos, if you can improve your body composition, there's nearly very high 95 to 100% chance that your performance in anything will improve. Like we speak about running in particular, if we look at scale weight and body weight in general, if you have a lower body weight, the chances of you being able to be more efficient when you're running is a lot higher. I think I heard something the last day I was watching an Ironman podcast, and they said the average body weight of a sub 3 hour marathon runner is 5 kilos, which is light. And there's a reason for that, because they don't have as much weight to carry around when they're running. So their efficiency and their running economy is a lot higher. If you're overweight, the first thing that you should do to track in terms of a metric is look to bring down your body fat if your goal is to improve performance or even running. If you're trying to carry around 110, 120 kilos of body weight, that's hard. Like, I mean, just try and go running with the 20-kilo vest on, Johnny, and you'll know how it feels to be 100, 115 kilos, whatever it might be. But yeah, I think body weight and body composition, body fat percentage first and foremost. Then obviously heart rate when it comes to running performance. That's obviously really important and something that people don't pay a crazy amount of attention to, which is a bit wild. But again, there's so much misinformation out there about heart rate and heart rate training and all that kind of stuff. VO2 max is a good one. Obviously on your wearable device, it's going to be inaccurate. But if you're seeing a trend and it's going upwards, then it probably means you're doing something right. That's quite important as well. Yeah, good job. Good job. I'm seeing it now at the moment on my Whoop as well. My Whoop VO2 max is going up, up, up. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care. That's great. That means I'm going in the right direction. I
Yeah.
know it's inaccurate, but at least I'm doing something. You could look at some strength numbers too, 5 rep maxes on bench press and deadlift or whatever that might be. I mean, these are things that aren't massively important, but if you're looking at metrics from a performance perspective, that's what I'd be looking at. Calorie intake, again, another metric that's quite important, carbohydrate intake. All these things are massively important when it looks at improving performance. But, the bare bone basics are going to be body composition, scale weight, heart rate, and VO2 max, I guess.
Yeah, that's fantastic because it's so hard when you're starting off a fitness journey or even continuing your fitness journey, knowing what's the right stuff, what should I be looking at, what are the key things here. So no, that's great information for people. Thank you very much. We're kind of heading to. I've kind of answered every question I kind of had in my head. Is there anything you'd like to share with people?
Yeah, I want to talk about fueling.
Yeah, let's go. Eat up.
There's so much, there's just so much to talk about here. And I just want to dive into even just, if you off the top of your head had a couple of questions around fueling or stuff that you would have spoken about or thought before we started working together, or any questions that you might have had, or any moments that you had when we were working together on the nutrition side of things, and you're like, damn, I thought it was like this, or I didn't realize I was like doing this or whatever, and that's made a big difference. Obviously, like for a lot of the people that are listening to this, be in a similar boat to you, so it's important that we try and just, again, my bias towards sports nutrition is always going to shine here, but we can never kind of put enough information out there about performance nutrition, and I suppose try and just let's dumb it down a little bit more for people, I guess.
Absolutely. Like fueling is so important for every aspect of life, for brain health, for gut health, for you name it. Like it really is the foundation of everything. When it comes to kind of deciding what foods you should have in the morning and different things like that, I know it's all very individual. It's very hard to give any blanket statements for people, but for you yourself, when you get up in the mornings, what is your go-to?
My go-to, I have a very similar kind of meal one and meal two all the time. So my meal one will always be either overnight oats, depending on, what my goal is, if I'm going to the gym or if I'm looking to lose body fat or whatever I'm doing at that time. The quantity of the meal will change, but the structure and the ingredients will always be very similar. So I'll probably have, oats, I'll have 2 scoops of whey protein, probably some low fat milk, and then like loads of berries. If I'm allowed to have a few extra calories, I'll put some peanut butter in on top of there, and maybe some honey. But it all depends. The core of the meal will always be overnight oats, or else I'll have eggs, sourdough, and some bacon medallions with maybe some tomatoes. That will always be kind of like my go-to. Breakfast is probably my favorite meal of the day. Like I'm looking over there now and I'm like, yeah, I cannot wait for breakfast.
Yeah, and I'd be very bad for skipping breakfast a lot of the time. I just feel I function better if I eat after 12 o'clock. But obviously, when I went having to increase my calories, I had to start adding more meals in and things like that. I know for my gut, I just feel I function better without eating in the mornings. But I know that when I'm training, I need to eat in the morning. So I suppose it's just finding the things that work for you and having an understanding of why you need to put more food in and taking the time to take that action. When it comes to kind of post run or post gym session, what are your go-tos there?
My go-to, like I'm very bad. I don't really look at food as food. I look at food as macros. It's really bad. So like I don't look at a dinner down there, whatever. I look at a dinner and I'm like, okay, it could be a curry with some white rice and some veg. And I'm looking at the plate and I'm like, protein, carbs, and micros. Let's go. Perfect. Job done. It's chronic. But my brain is conditioned. But I think for pre-workout and post-workout, it's really important to manage the macronutrients that you're consuming, because obviously the goal for those meals is performance and to feel your best during your sessions. So pre-workout, before you go to the gym, fat is something that we have to keep low, and fiber is something that we have to keep low, which might sound a little bit weird to a lot of people, but the reason being is that fat will slow down the digestion of and the uptake of glycogen or carbohydrates into the bloodstream and the muscles. So we need to make sure that we keep fat low, so the uptake of glycogen is a little bit faster, right? Because we want to be able to use those carbohydrates during our training session. Whereas if we're consuming carbohydrates with loads of fat, so let's say we go to the gym and we're having 2 slices of sourdough and 4 eggs. To most people, that's a really good solid meal, very healthy. That's great. Or you might throw in some avocado in on top of that too. Yeah, fantastic meal, but absolutely probably a terrible meal to have before going to the gym. So like, again, there's caveats to everything. If our goal is performance, then we can still have that meal, but let's have 1 egg white, one egg with full yolk, and then have the rest egg whites, because we're pulling away the fat from the yolk. We're keeping protein moderate, and then we're having our sourdough. But then again, you don't want to be using like butter on the sourdough. So you might want to try and maybe leave that out, or there's a lot of different things that you should think about. But the same principle probably applies for pre-training meal to post-training meal. We can also add in a little bit of more fat and fiber into our post-training meal, but carbohydrates are still going to need to be high, and protein is still need to be going to moderate as well. So moderate protein pre and post, but high carbs pre and post as well. Low fat, low fiber. If we can kind of follow that principle across the board to around our training times, then, we'll be fairly in good shape, to be honest. And then breakfast and dinner can be kind of like whatever you want, really.
I think if anyone ever wanted proof of why it's so good to go to an expert to get information, that just last sentence there all just sums it completely up, because you can think you're eating healthy for what you're trying to do. And as you said, eggs, sourdough, avocado, on the surface, what a healthy meal. But at the wrong time, for the wrong thing you're trying to use it for, wrong fueling, is just incorrect. So yeah, no, it's testament to what it is to go and seek expert advice. And for anyone who wants to pick your brain a little bit more, how could they get in contact with you?
So on Instagram, emp.ie, or my new page, emp.golf, if you like golf. Throw that in there. But yeah, emp.ie on Instagram. If anybody has any questions about anything, I'm always happy to answer any questions. Pop me across a message, and yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And we'll have to say thank you so much for sharing the running programs with us. They're brilliant. I've done them myself, and I got my PB 8K time after it in the streets of Galway, which I'm booked into again this year. So we're going beating it again, baby.
Let's go. We're going what, sub 35, are we?
Yeah, I'm going sub 35 this time. We'll try and go sub 30. I'll break my legs in the attempt. But anyway.
Let's go. Look at that. Making those programs is something that I love doing. I absolutely really enjoy it. So it's great to be able to give them to people that are going to make good use of them.
Yeah, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure talking to you, my friend.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
For anyone who's looking for any information, I will have all Oisin's contact details in the description. Thank you very much, bro.
Peace and love.
Peace and love. Episode 1 done. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with someone you think might benefit from it. And of course, don't forget to follow, like, subscribe. It all helps us grow and reach more people to join the Runs Club. The bigger that we can make this, the more opportunities, the more fun we can create for our members. So join in, drop a comment below, any future guests that you'd like to hear. We'll do our best to make it happen. Currently, we're just figuring out how often we should have episodes. So let me know in the comments if you'd like maybe weekly drops or possibly every second week. Maybe you only want to hear from me monthly. I'll let you decide. My next guest will be Esteban Garcia, who's an estimate who can run a sub 3 hour marathon. Insane speed. So stay tuned for the next one. I'll see you then.